Before the video begins, I just want to clarify, in the video I say this is the final part, this is part 10 and the final part, but actually I have another part I'm preparing as well, so there is going to be a part 11 at some point, inshallah. And then if I find more stuff, I'll probably do more parts after that as well. But for now, I just wanted to clarify that even though in the video I say this is the final part, actually there is going to be at least one more part that's going to come out at some point. So there is going to be a part 11, despite what I say in the video. Welcome to Intertextuality 10. Here we're just going to be wrapping up two more examples. They're longer examples, but just two. So hopefully this video isn't too long, because we're just wrapping up the rest of the examples that I have. Um, so after this, I will be doing a couple videos where I go more into like the conclusions we can draw from the series and everything, how it proves Islam, because I want to recap a little bit more of that, and go into a little bit more detail, like we've discussed it, chopped out here and there in the series, but I'd like to make a separate video on the conclusions. Also, then I'll post another guy's video on it, pretty interesting as well. So yeah, let's get into it. Of course, we always mention in the beginning some of the main points that we go through before starting the examples. Number one, the fact that the Prophet Muhammad couldn't read or write. Number two, the fact that many of these texts the Quran is interacting with were untranslated or lost texts. We also discussed the fact that the Quran corrects these texts. Also, the fact that the Prophet was clearly sincere in this and that. For example, I'll give you an example. The fact that even at the end of his life, he did not have much food. Months would go by, and almost nothing would be, no fire, meaning no fire, nothing would be cooked at the house of the Prophet. Right? So they had to eat other foods like dates and this and that. If he was making it up, and remember he was the leader of Medina, so if he wanted, he could have taken advantage and could have gotten all these worldly possessions, but he didn't. The fact that the Meccans did not know these stories, in fact, the Arabs did not know these stories in general. So even having a slight biblical knowledge would be would be a sign of his prophethood. But he knows that, what I want to say is the Quranic author has such deep biblical insight that obviously this could not be Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Also, if he was being taught by someone, people would have noticed. Finally, everything biblical and extra biblical is tradition. So that's relevant because we cover extra biblical stuff here too, and some people will say, well, no, only the Bible's authentic, everything else is fake. No, it's not. The Bible has fake stuff in it. So does that extra biblical tradition. Both are truth mixed with falsehood. We refuted claims of in the series that the Prophet or that that ahistorical events are being referred to, that the Quran through through the fact that it has information which is also in apocryphal sources means it's ahistorical. I've refuted those in part 2, shown linguistic connections in part 3, and also in part 6 and 7, I think, which proves, or I showed one example in 7, or two examples in 7, or something like that, maybe 2 or whatever. But yeah, so that refutes the idea that this is only known through oral traditions. Of course, that's useless anyway, because the Arabs didn't know these stories, so there was no oral culture, obviously. But yeah, these stories were not known in Mecca. The Jews lived in Medina, yet most of these stories were already revealed in Mecca. Right, as you can see here, most of the stories revealed in Mecca already. Man, what is this? What's going on, man? Okay, I'm gonna stop this. Okay. So the stories, most of them were already revealed in Mecca, where again there were no Jews and Christians. Bible wasn't translated yet. Talmud wasn't translated yet. Here you can read some Orientalists mentioning Christians did not exist there, and they did not know the Bible there was not translated. Blah blah blah. again, I'll save most of this for the summary or the conclusion videos. So again, we just have a couple examples to go through in this video, but there are longer, so it's not like it's going to be a 2-minute video. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is the fact that Jesus is related to Aaron and David. In the Quran, there's he seems to be related to Aaron, and also have some sort of connection to David. So we know this because in the Quran it's mentioned that Maryam, after she gave birth to Jesus, فأتت به قومها تحمله قالوا يا مريم لقد جئت شيئا فريا. Then she brought him to her people carrying him, meaning the baby. They said, "O Maryam, you have certainly done a thing unprecedented. يا أخت هارون ما كان أبوك امرأ سوء وما كانت أمك بغيا." O sister of Aaron, your father was not a man of evil, nor was your mother unchaste. فأشارت إليه قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد سبيا. So she pointed to him. They said, "How can we speak to one who is in the cradle, a child?" Okay. O sister of Harun, what does it mean? So I've already explained the typological connection here. The fact that the Christians made this typology between Mary and Mary, the brother of Aaron, and blah blah blah. And I already clarified this is not. Okay, I've clarified that because some Christians say, "Oh, this means the prophet messed up the timeline." No, I clarified this already. Here, I want to show it from a different angle. Okay, so most commentators will actually say a sister of Harun, Aaron here, that it is a reference to her her being descendant from the line of Aaron, which is called in the Bible being a Levite. That you're a Levite, meaning you're descended from Aaron. Okay, now some did interpret it literally as her having a brother named Aaron. I actually think this view makes sense. I've always held this view, as Asadi mentions, but both views are true as well. Both views can be true as well. No. One doesn't have to be the only true version, or what I'm trying to say is one meaning only doesn't have to be true. Both can be true. They're not contradictory, right? So both can be true. I, however, have taken the opinion since the beginning that this is a reference to her actual brother. But regardless, you can see most commentators explain this as meaning she actually had she was a Levite, meaning she was a descendant of Aaron. As Ibn Kathir mentions here, this O sister of Harun, referring to the brother of Moses, because she was of his descendants. This is similar to the saying, "O brother of Tamim," to one who is from the Tamimi tribe, and "O brother of Mudar," to one who is from the Mudari tribe. It has also been said that she was related to a righteous man among them whose name was Harun, and she was comparable to him in her abstinence in worship. Okay. Concerning Allah's statement. Okay, so never mind. Anyway. Also, there's a hadith which mentions where this is explained. When I reached Najran, which is a northern part in Arabia, where there were Christians that I've explained before, not in Mecca, all the way up there. Which again shows us that the Arabs in Mecca did not know these stories. Right, the Christian community is far, far away. The Jewish community is far and away in Medina. The Christian community, one community far away in Najran. So the person explained, when I reached Najran, they questioned me, saying, "You," meaning Muslims, read, "O sister of Aaron, but Moses was before Jesus," and so on. So when I went to the Prophet, I asked him about this, and he said they used to alternatively call by their prophets and righteous ones before them. Right. So of course we do this too. We name people, we call people based on prophets of beforehand. Right. Think about how many Muhammads there are in the world. It's the most popular name. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you actually get families as well, which, for example, will name, if they have two sons, they'll name someone Moses and Aaron, right? So you get that as well. And if they have a sister, they might name her Mary as well. They might even be going on. If my name is like Zachariah, I'll name my child Yahya. Zachariah, and then Yahya would be like John the Baptist. Or if it's a woman and her name is Mary, she would name her son Isa. Isa is Jesus in Islam, and we have children who we name Isa, meaning Jesus, right? Also, the Quran says, وَإِلَى ثَمُودَ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا, and to Samud we sent their brother Saleh. So this idea, so this is a Semitic language thing where you say you're from the tribe of someone by saying you're the brother slash sister of them. So when it says, "Oh, sister of Aaron," that's why many people said what is meant is she is from the tribe of Aaron, like a Levite, her descendant, right? Again, because of this hadith, it seems to indicate that Mary uh, was Mary and Aaron. Mary had a brother named Aaron, and they were both called Mary and Aaron because of the relationship with Aaron and Aaron, the brother of Moses, and they had a sister named Miriam. Okay, so that's the Prophet's explanation, or seems to be, but the other meanings are also considered, right? Depending on how you read the hadith, I guess. Anyway, someone says that. Anyway. Chapter 335 also seems to indicate that Mary was a Levite, meaning she was from the tribe of Aaron. We know this because it says, إِذْ قَالَتْ امْرَأَةُ إِمْرَانَ رَبِّي إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لَكَ مَا فِي بَطْنِي مُحَرَّرًا فَتَقَبَّلْ مِنِّي إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. When the wife of Imran said, "My Lord, indeed I have pledged to you what is in my womb, concestrated for your service, so accept this from me. Indeed, you are the hearing, the knowing," meaning dedicated to serve you, meaning like servant. It seems to mean serve in the temple and this and that. And of course, the people who served the temple were the Levites. That seems to indicate that she thought her son was going to be a Levite because she thought she would be having a male child, or that I should say, she hoped that it would be male so that she could serve, so that the child could serve in the temple. فلما ودعتها قالت ربي إني وضعتها أنثى والله أعلم بما وضعت وليس الذكر كالأنثى وإني سميتها مريم وإني أعيذها بك وذريتها من الشيطان الرجيم. But when she delivered her, she said, "My Lord, I have delivered a female, and Allah was most knowing of what she delivered, and the male is not like the female. And I have named her Maryam, and I seek refuge for her in you and for her descendants from Satan the expelled." فتقبلها ربها بقبول حسن وأنبتها نباتا حسنا وكفلها زكريا كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا قال يا مريم أنى لك هذا قالت هو من عند الله إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. So her Lord accepted her with good acceptance and caused her to grow in a good manner, and put her in the care of Zechariah. Every time Zechariah entered upon her in the prayer chamber, he found with her provision. He said, "O Maryam, where is this coming to you?" She said, "It is from Allah. Indeed, Allah provides for who He wills without account." So again, there's this indication that she was a Levite because Zechariah was seems to be the high priest of the temple, and that would make him a Levite. And so now she's in the temple as well, and yeah. So we have this idea before that she's in the temple, then she goes under Zechariah's care, who also is the high priest. Thus was most likely a Levite, it seems. Ibn Kathir mentioning the story of Maryam's birth. The wife of Imran mentioned here is the mother of Maryam, and her name is Hannah bint Faqud, whatever. Muhammad bin Ishaq mentioned that Hannah could not have children, and that one day she saw a bird feeding its chick. She wished she could have had children and supplicated to Allah to grant her offspring. Allah accepted her supplication, and when her husband slept with her, she became pregnant. She vowed to make her child concentrate on worship and serving Bayt al-Maqdis, the masjid in Jerusalem, when she became aware that she was pregnant. Okay. وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, and the male is not like the female in strength and the commitment to worship Allah and serve the masjid in Jerusalem. And again, it was the high priests, that were the ones who took care of the temple and this and that. So Aaron, as mentioned, Aaron received from God a monopoly over the priesthood for himself and his male descendants, right? So the priesthood stuff is from Aaron. So I'll show this to you if I can. Levites lead the temple. I don't know if what Google's going to say to this, but so what did the Levites do in the temple, right? So they were like the leaders of the temple. Leaders to the temple. So tribe of Levi. So they were the priests of the temple, right? Performed the work of holiness in the temple. So the Levites are the ones who perform the holy work in the temple. Holiness. A subject of the Levites were the priests who performed works of holiness in the temple. Okay, so that's the indication that Miriam was a Levite. Because again, they wanted her to. She wanted her to be committed to worship Allah and serve the masjid in Jerusalem. Okay, so we call it a quote unquote temple because Jews say that, but whatever. It should be called Masjid al-Aqsa. So again, I think this is taken from Israeliyat, so the Jewish or probably some Christian traditions. Uh, so we don't believe in that and we don't reject it, but I just mentioned it because it explains, but because the indications are in the Quran already that she wanted him to serve in the masjid and whatnot. وَاسْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمَ. And so mentioned in the book Mary. She was Maryam bint Imran from the family lineage of Dawood, so from the lineage of David. So here, I guess he's getting this from the New Testament. This is Ibn Kathir probably getting it from some other Christian tradition that she is from the line of David. So we see both the idea that he's from the line of Aaron, she's from the line of Aaron, and the line of David. The line of Aaron seems to be the commentary of the verse in the Quran, and then this David one seems to be getting, they seem to be getting from the New Testament. Certainly possible she was from both lines, because her father could have been a Levite and her mother from the line of David, or vice versa, right? And I know that some will argue that in Judaism it's only from the father. Perhaps not, but the idea of, regardless, the blood would be in her, right? The blood of both David and Aaron would be in her, even if you would not call her by both tribes, right? Maybe you would call her by the tribe of Aaron, a Levite, but because her mother would have David's blood in her, she would be both a descendant of David and Aaron, but called by this descendant of called by the sister of called by the tribe of Aaron, called a Levite. Okay, Bible says you have to call them by the names of their, basically the tribal calling is by the father. Or it seems to be indicated. It's not like set in stone. I don't think. From what I've seen in the Bible, I don't see that as being something set in stone, but indicated. Perhaps preferred even, because you can see that as being preferred. Okay. So anyway, Allah mentioned the story of her mother's pregnancy with her in Surah Al Imran, and that she dedicated her fully for the service of Allah. This meant that she dedicated the child to the service of the masjid of the sacred house in Jerusalem. Thus they, meaning Zechariah, Maryam's mother, and Maryam was similar in that aspect. She withdrew in seclusion from her family to place facing east. This means that she withdrew from them and secluded herself from them. She went to the eastern side of the sacred masjid. It is reported from Ibn Abbas that she said, "Verily, I am the most knowledgeable of It is reported from Ibn Abbas that he said, "Verily, I am the most knowledgeable of Allah's creation." Of why the Christians took the east as the direction of devotional worship, they did that because of Allah's statement that we just looked at, I guess. Anyway, or maybe in a different statement. Anyway, point is, Levites are the ones who lead the temple. Now, what is the intertextual? Some of them, number one, it clears up Jesus' genealogy, which is a mess in the Bible. So we have a genealogy in Luke, we have a genealogy in Matthew, and they are hopelessly contradictory. Okay. Jesus, when he began his ministry, was about 30 years of age, being the son of Joseph. So look, they're trying to go through Joseph, but Jesus was virgin born. Joseph's not supposed to be in his lineage. And why do they do that? Because they're trying to connect him with David, because the Old Testament seems to indicate the Messiah is going to be the son of David. But that's a fake thing in the Old Testament, actually, in my opinion. Maybe there was some remnant of it, but that seems to be propaganda from Judaic sources in the Old Testament. Anyway, so the reason they're doing this is they want to connect him to David. Okay, let's see if we can find David here. Son of Mattah, son of Levi, son of Joseph, son of Mattah, son of son of. He's the son. He's the son. Did you know he's the son of this guy? He's the son of this guy. He's the son of this guy. Son of Joshua. Okay, son of David. So because they're trying to connect him to David, so I guess Joseph must have been descended from David. And so they're like, well, we can't connect Mary through him. Maybe they couldn't connect Mary through him, so they tried to go through David. So they tried to go through Joseph. Then in Matthew we have another genealogy, and again the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then at the end, as you go through, you find it mentions Nathan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus. So again, why is why is Joseph being mentioned here? It's just weird. But anyway, the point is, in order to try and make Jesus a son of Levi, the son of David, they had to do all this stuff, right? And then later on, Christians were like, oh no, Luke must have been talking about Mary's genealogy. So there's whole confusion about what Jesus' genealogy and what Mary's genealogy is. Quran seems to be clearing that all up. No, he was a Levite. Deal with that, right? Um, yeah, and again, you'll see this big contradictions here. For example, Jacob is here the father of Joseph, whereas in Luke, who's the father of Joseph? Joseph, the son of Heli. And you'll see throughout it's just big contradictions. And the Quran also makes clear who the real father of Mary is. Not this guy. Christians will read this today and say, even though it says Jesus being the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, they say, no, actually this is Mary's genealogy. And so they say Mary was the son of a guy named Heli. So Allah clears that up in the Quran. وَمَرْيَمَ بَنَّةَ Imran. And Mary, the daughter of Imran. Okay, so that's Mary's actual father. 2 Timothy 2:8-9. Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, descended from David. Again, trying to connect him to David. According to the Gospel of Luke, during the reign of King Herod, there was a priest named Zechariah of the course of Abiah, whose wife Elizabeth was also the priestly family of Aaron. So Elizabeth was from Aaron, was a Levite. Elizabeth was a Levite. Okay, who's the mother of John the Baptist, the wife of Zechariah. Okay. Luke 1:36. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. Okay. Luke 1:38. I'm the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May your word to me be fulfilled. And the angel left her. So I just put this there to show you that Mary's the one being spoken to. So it's Mary's relative. Now, in the Hadith literature, it's made clear that Mary was Elizabeth's sister. So in the Bible, it seems to be some sort of relative, but in the Hadith literature, it's her sister. So if she was a Levite, if Elizabeth was a Levite, it seems that Mary would have been a Levite as well, right? If they were, yeah, yeah, that would work. Yeah, that works, right? Uh, as long as they had the same father, if you go by the father thing. But it seems that's indicated. Anyway, how do we know this? Because the Prophet said, when I entered, I saw Yahya and Isa, who are maternal cousins. I saw, oh, they're maternal cousins. Um, right, they are maternal. Duh. Anyway, because they're maternal cousins, which means their mothers are both sisters, and so that would mean Miriam, her sister was Elizabeth. Elizabeth was Levite. That would probably make Mary a Levite as well, right? That's another indication that she is a Levite. But again, all this doesn't so it's not necessary that the she's a Levite in the Quran, but perhaps, and it does seem to be indicated a lot. Why? Because we also have this verse. لُعِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى لِسَانِ دَاوُودَ وَعِيسَى بْنِ مَرْيَمَ ذَلِكَ بِمَا عَصَوا وَكَانُوا يَعْتَدُونَ. This is after a big discourse, not a big discourse, but much discourse on Jesus, how he's not God and the Trinity is wrong and all this stuff. It mentions, cursed were those who disbelieved among the children of Israel by the tongue of David and of Jesus, the son of Miriam. That was because they disobeyed and transgressed. So seems to be a connection with David and Jesus. Jesus and David seem to be connected. So the Quran connecting him to the Levites, also connecting him to David. Again, I mentioned it seems perhaps Miriam had both the blood of David, the royal blood, and also the blood of Aaron, the priestly blood, both in her, right? And then she would pass on actually both to Jesus, since she didn't, it was a special thing. There was no father, so of course the genealogy of Jesus is going to be determined through the mother, because there is no father, so it's a special case. Even if you read the Bible as saying that it has to be through the father, and no one cares about the Bible anyway. I mean, I don't care what the Bible says anyway. I'm just mentioning that. So that would mean Jesus has both David and priestly, meaning Aaron's blood in him, right? Why mention Jesus and David together? David and Jesus. David and Jesus. Why? David just randomly showing up here? Is that what's going on? No, there's connection between the two classically. That's why it makes sense to mention both of them together. And there are other reasons as well for why David is mentioned here. Of course, there's connection. Many reflections we can come up here, right? David is not just randomly mentioned here. You could have mentioned any prophet. That's not what's going on. One of the reasons, of course, seems to be the fact that David and Jesus have traditionally been connected, because David has been traditionally linked with the Messiah. And the connection with David, the king sort of Messiah thing, is also hinted to in the Hadith literature, where Allah's Messenger said, "By him in whose hand my soul is, surely Jesus, the son of Maryam, will soon descend among you and will judge mankind justly." Okay, so his return as a just ruler and this and that. That's the Davidic side of the Messiahship, that he'll be the king of Israel, or not the king of the king, and who's going to be the king of the world and this and that. Meaning he's going to be like, there's going to be one state, like one country. Basically, everyone will follow the Messiah, and he'll be like the king type of leader thing. That's alluded to in the Hadith literature, that this is what it's going to be like when he returns. And then the priestly aspect of the Messiah, that he's just going to be a preacher at the temple and this and that. That being alluded to by him being the descendant of Aaron. And I mentioned how, both bloods could be there. So Mary would be descended from both of them, even though she would be probably called after only one tribe, right? Because you call them after one tribe in the Bible. Again, what the Bible means by by naming the child after the father, it's just like when it's in genealogies, the fathers are mentioned. There's much discussion on what that means. It's not clear cut. Anyway. Also, early Christian writings seem to suggest that Mary was a Levite as well. So this is found confirmation. The Ukhta Harun, the sister of Aaron, meaning she was a Levite, seems to be confirmed in these other Christian texts. For example, the Gospel of the Birth of Mary, preserved in a reference given by Phaestus, directly states that Mary was a Levite, and some scholars trace this material to the 2nd century, actually, and there's more 2nd century sources as well. If I find something on scholars mention the exact reference of them saying this is 2nd century, I'll put that in the doc. But anyway, in the Gospel of the Birth of Mary, Here you can see it specifically states the virgin herself was not of this tribe, meaning the house of David and tribe of Judah, but of the tribe of Levi, meaning a Levite, meaning descendant of Aaron. Okay. Also, this finds the Dead Sea Scrolls, interestingly, were waiting for two messiahs, one messiah for Aaron and the other Davidic messiah. A messiah was supposed to be like David. Quran, of course, seems to indicate Jesus was descendant of Aaron, and that also makes that connection with David and Jesus. So this is about the Dead Sea Scrolls. We begin with Jewish expectations of the Messianic arrival. According to the community rule, a document found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, three figures will appear at the end of times: the prophet mentioned in Deuteronomy 18:18, and the two messiahs of Aaron and Israel. The first a priestly messiah, the second a royal Davidic messiah, who will be subservient to blah blah blah. Okay, so people were thinking there's going to be this messiah from Aaron, and then also a Davidic type of typology, Davidic type of messiah as well. I know the Bible says he's going to be from David. Again, I explained that there's just Judaic source propaganda. But regardless, also some people will say, well, where does the Bible say? Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls had more books, so they probably derived it from those other books. They had many other books, not just the Bible. Okay, the Bible has a lot of fake stuff in it. Anyway, contradictions, false prophecies, so many problems. It wasn't even written by the prophets, so the Qumran community might have had more insight into what the Messiah was actually supposed to be like and whatnot. So they, of course, even them, they had some heretical beliefs, so it's not like they're fully trustworthy either, but clearly they had this tradition of a Messiah from Aaron and a Messiah, a Davidic sort of Messiah. And so the Quran, by connecting Jesus to both Aaron and David, fulfills this expectation, right? Anyway, the passage. So this is the exact passage of the where it mentions the Dead Sea Scrolls having this expectation, and you see, so it says, until there come the prophet and the messiahs of Aaron and Israel. Okay, a single messiah from both. So because the Bible seems to indicate there's going to be a single messiah, and throughout that seems to be the most common expectation, even in the New Testament, who would be familiar with some of these apocryphal, some of these other sources. It seems what actually was going on was there was one Messiah, and perhaps he was supposed to be descended from Aaron and be like a David typology, like related to David in a way in that he's similar to David, right? Or descended from both. And the fact of the matter is, it seems Miriam was a Levite, but she could have been descended from both, because the connection with David is also made. Ibn Kathir also mentioned Miriam is the son of David, or the sister, the daughter of David, right? So Miriam could be from both, fulfilling both criteria, that he has to be from Aaron, a Levite, and also a Davidic in some sense. And of course, the Aaron part, the priestly type of role he played, already mentioned before, the fact that he was like a prophet and a messenger, and he preached to the temple and this and that. And then the Davidic king sort of type of role when he returns, right? Damascus documents records a single Messiah, both Aaron and Israel. So also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they have this other opinion that the Messiah is just going to be one. There's just going to be one Messiah, and he's going to be from both. So he's going to be for a Levite. He's going to be from Aaron, but he's going to be Davidic in a sense that he's gonna be do things that are similar to what David did. Like David was a king and this and that, and that's what's meant. So you also have this opinion that there's just going to be one Messiah, and he's going to be both descended from Aaron and David, and like David in a sense. And the Quran obviously bringing David and Jesus up together, while at the same time seeming to indicate Jesus is from the line of Aaron. How would Muhammad have known this stuff? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is deep into Jewish-Christian expectations of the Messiah, right? Oh, jeez. An important text for Mary's genealogy in Syriac, so even Syriacs, some of the Syriac people saw Mary as descending from Aaron, okay? So in Syriac is Ephraim's commentary on Tatian's Da Tessaron. Ephraim considers the consequences of Mary as the kinswoman of Elizabeth. Evidently, at an earlier date in the Syriac tradition, some wanted to see Christ's Levitical priesthood transmitted directly through the genealogy of Mary. This is explicitly stated in the earliest known manuscript of the commentary in Armenian translation. Because Christ was both to make silent kingship and priesthood, the scripture teaches about the genealogy of both of them at once, about Judah through Joseph and about Levi through Mary. In contrast, however, stands the Syriac version, which seems to systematically preserve an emphasis on the regal Davidic lineage of Jesus. Okay, and so some of them condemn that she is from she is priestly in origin. Okay, and remember that Dead Sea Scrolls were waiting a prophet, and Elijah denied that John the Baptist denies that he's that prophet. So who must that prophet be? It must be Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What do you think about Christ? And he also denied being. Okay, so Jesus in Matthew 22:43 says, "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" David's, they answered. Jesus said to them, "How then does David in the Spirit call him Lord? For he says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under my feet." By the way, in the Hebrew, the first Lord is the Yovhe Wovhe, and the second one is Adoni. So it says Yovhe Wovhe, says to Adoni. Adoni is only used for humans, according to Tovia Singer. So this isn't the Trinity. Adoni is not Adonai. Okay. So in the Hebrew, this actually reads Yovhe Wovhe said to Adoni, and Adoni is only used for humans. I have to mention this because some say this means Jesus. This means the Messiah is going to be God, but it's not. So here Jesus seems to be refuting the idea that the Messiah has to be from David. Psalm 110. Here you can see the Hebrew, it says, Yovhe Wovhe said to Adoni. Here Genesis 24:27, an example of when Adoni is used, but it means a human being, of my master Abraham, okay? Anyway, point was, expectations, that the Messiah is going to be Davidic in a sense, but also from the line of Aaron, and the Quran, of course, saying لُعِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى لِسَانِ دَاوُودَ وَعِيسَى بْنِ مَرْيَمَ. Cursed were those who disbelieved from the children of Israel upon the tongue of David and Jesus, son of Mary. And then other places connecting Jesus' lineage, seemingly, with that of Aaron. So fulfilling both roles. Interesting intertextual connection. And with that, we go on to our last connection here, for which I will read out to you the thread, then come back here. There's the thread. Ooh. Oh god, did I put that in here? Yeah, I did. Okay, good. How the Quran fixes the contradictory accounts of Nehemiah and Ezra in the Old Testament with one verse. So, let's read this part. This is from the Hebrew Bible Today, an introduction to critical issues, from pages 201 to 206. It's somewhere in there. Okay. Artaxerxes' seventh year. Oh my god. Man. So basically, Ezra enters Jerusalem in Artaxerxes' seventh year, while Nehemiah 2:1-9 indicates that Nehemiah left for Judea in Artaxerxes' 20th year. First, while Nehemiah 7 credits Nehemiah with rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, Ezra 9:9 notes that Ezra found the walls already rebuilt when he arrived in Jerusalem, even though Ezra arrived 13 years ago. Okay. In the case of Nehemiah 12:26, Nehemiah's name may have been added to the episode by the editor, since the verb in Nehemiah 8:9 is in the singular. Third, in Nehemiah's review of the census of people who returned with Zerubbabel, none of the approximately 5,000 returning with Ezra are mentioned. With the high priest Eliashib, finally Nehemiah was a contemporary with the high priest Eliashib, while Ezra lived in the time of Jehonan ben Eliasrib, who was the grandson, not the son of Eliashib. Okay, so when in Ezra's time, the high priest is the grandson of the high priest at the time of Nehemiah. So how does that make sense? How does that make sense that basically the story is that the Israelites had been expelled to Babylon, And now God is allowing them permission to come back. So first he allows Ezra to come, then Nehemiah. Ezra comes in the seventh year of this king's rule. Nehemiah comes in the 20th rule. Remember, Jerusalem was all completely destroyed by the Babylonians. So when Ezra comes back, he finds when Ezra comes back, he finds that the wall is completely rebuilt. But when Nehemiah, who's supposed to arrive 13 years later, arrives, he has to rebuild the wall. So how does that make any sense? The wall and everything was destroyed by the Babylonians, and when Nehemiah comes in, the wall is still destroyed, so they have to rebuild it. But Ezra came 7 years ago, and the wall was fixed, and there's no rebuilding. It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, but at the time of Nehemiah, the high priest is this dude, and then at the time of Ezra, who's supposed to arrive 7 years later, or 13 years earlier, the high priest is the grandson of the dude at the time of Nehemiah. He's the grandson. What? How's the grandson the high priest? It doesn't make any sense, especially when Ezra is supposed to come 13 years before. He's supposed to arrive 13 years before. So the timeline doesn't make any sense. So here they're proposing ways to solve this problem. A third proposal to resolve this issue has been popularized in John Bright, who amends 7th year in Ezra 7:7 to 8 to 37th year, explaining that the error arose because of a scribe's error copying the text. So look at how they have to cope to try and fix this. All right, let me read out the thread now, so you know what's going on if you didn't understand from that. Basically, the Israelites lived in Babylon after Jerusalem was destroyed, and they were captured by Nebuchadnezzar. I would not want to be named that. Ezra was allowed to lead the Jews through Jerusalem and arrived in the 7th year of Artaxerxes. Nehemiah leaves to Jerusalem with another group in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. Here you can see Ezra 7, 8 to 13. Ezra arrived in Jerusalem in the 5th month of the 7th year of the king. In King Artaxerxes' letter to Ezra, this is a copy of the letter King Artaxerxes had left to Ezra the priest, a teacher of the law, a man learned in matter concerning the commandments and decrees of the Lord. Ezra arrives in 7th year. Okay, Nehemiah arrives, however, in the 20th year. As you can see here in the heading, they mention Nehemiah arrives in the 20th year. Nehemiah leaves in the 20th year of the rule. Okay, Nehemiah arrives 13 years later. Here they mention. Perhaps the most vigorously debated issue in the interpretation of Ezra and Nehemiah is that of the chronological order of the two primary figures in the work. In addition to the fact that the canonical sequence itself suggests that Ezra's activity occurred before Nehemiah's, there are two other factors that favor the sequence. First, Ezra 7:8 reports that Ezra arrived in Jerusalem in the 5th month of Artaxerxes' 7th year, while Nehemiah 21:9 indicates that Nehemiah left for Judea in Artaxerxes' 20th year. So what is going on in the chronology? They have no idea. When Nehemiah arrives, Israel is still in ruins, the wall is still destroyed, and there are very few people. However, in Ezra's account, the wall is reconstructed, there is a large number of believers, and Ezra seems to be clueless about what is happening in the city. About 7. There were few people in it, and the houses had not yet been rebuilt. Nehemiah inspects Jerusalem's wall. You see the trouble we are in, Jerusalem lies in ruins. They replied, let us start rebuilding, so they began this good work. I'm going to sneeze. Ugh, God. Jeez, okay. Ezra 9. So, as Ezra's time, you can see the people of Israel, including the priests and Levites, have not kept themselves separate from the neighboring people with their detestable practices, like those of the Canaanites, blah, blah, blah. They've taken some of their daughters. So when he comes, he checks this out and he sees what's going on. Anyway, they have taken some of their daughters as wives for themselves and their sons, and have mingled the holy race with the peoples around them, and the leaders and officials have led the way in the unfaithfulness. When I heard this, I tore my tunic and cloak, and pulled hair from my head and beard, and sat down appalled. Then everyone who trembled at the words of the God of Israel gathered around me because of this unfaithfulness of the exiles, and I sat there appalled at the unveiling sacrifice. So it seems like there are a lot of people when Ezra arrives, but in Nehemiah, there were just a few. Right, a few people in it. Ezra 9:9 notes that Ezra found the walls in place when he arrived, and while Nehemiah lists the returnees who came back with Zerubbabel, he seems to know nothing about the 5,000 or so who accompanied Ezra in Nehemiah 7 5 to 73 and Ezra 8 1 to 14. So, as Ezra sees, he has granted us new life to rebuild the house of our God and repair its ruins, and he has given us a wall of protection in Judah and Jerusalem. So clearly, when Ezra arrives, the wall is still there. It's already been rebuilt. But Nehemiah arrived and rebuilt the wall, starting from 13 years after Ezra arrived, apparently, or Ezra left for Jerusalem and arrived there. Yeah. Okay. Ezra 10. A large crowd of Israelites, men, women, and children gathered around him. So a large crowd gathered around Ezra, even though in Nehemiah says uh, there were few people in it. There were few people in it, and the house has not been rebuilt. The wall, and they had to rebuild the wall. But in Ezra, the wall's already there, and blah blah blah. Okay. Another massive problem: the high priest in Nehemiah is named Eliasib. Yet when Ezra gets to the city, Eliasib's grandson is the high priest. The chronology of high priests is given in Nehemiah 12:22. The family heads of the Levites in the days of Eliasib, Jodiah, Johanan, and Judea, as well as those of the priests, were recorded in the reign of Darius the Persian. Nehemiah 12:10 to 11. Joshua the father of Joachim, Joachim the father of Eliashib, Eliashib the father of Joadiah, Joadiah the father of Jonathan, Jonathan the father of Judea. Okay. Eliashib was a high priest, as you can see. The high priest is mentioned in Nehemiah as the grandfather of the high priest Johanan, who is the one in Ezra. Okay. As you can see, Johanan, his father is Judea, his father is Eliashib. Eliashib is the grand priest at the time, or the high priest at the time of Nehemiah, but at the time of Ezra, it's Johanan, his grandson. That doesn't make any sense because Ezra is supposed to come 13 years before Nehemiah. Ezra 10:6. Then Ezra withdrew before the house of God and went to the room of Jehohanan, son of Eliashib. How is Jonathan the high priest? If this is Ezra's first entrance into Jerusalem, how is Johanan or Jonathan the high priest, or even there at all? No, Nehemiah is nowhere found in Ezra's account. Doesn't make any sense, right? So as you can see here, the Eliashib being the high priest is in Nehemiah 12:10 to 22 if you want to see the reference for that. Anyway, here they write uh, again of people who returned with Zerubbabel, none of the approximately 5,000 returning with Ezra are mentioned in Nehemiah, basically. Finally, Nehemiah was a contemporary with the high priest Eliashib, while Ezra lived in the time of Johanan ben Eliasrib, was the grandson, not the son of Eliashib. There are multiple numerical contradictions between the accounts as well. So, another thing I'll mention before we go into that is we have a letter from Elephantine Papyri. Among the Elephantine Papyri, a collection of 5th century BCE Hebrew manuscripts from the Jewish community at Elephantine in Egypt, a letter was found in which Johanan is mentioned. The letter is dated blah 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 to 407 BCE. It mentions, we also have sent a letter before now when the evil was done to us, to our Lord, and to the high priest Johanan. So that's another historical confirmation that Johanan was actually a high priest, okay? It's historically established as well, by the way. Ezra 2:6-5 mentions there were 200 singing men and singing women. Oh, God, okay. I think... Ooh. But in the Hamaya, there are 244 something, I think. Anyway, I'll show that to you in a second. Besides their servants and their maids, of whom there were 7,003. Okay, so anyway, in Ezra there were 200 singing men and singing women. And I will show you what is said in Nehemiah. In Nehemiah 7:67, it is said that there were 245 singers. Even if you want to say this is an approximate, it still doesn't make sense because you would approximate it as 250, not 200. Okay, so there's a numerical contradiction as well, which shows they're really screwing up what's going on here. Ezra left for Jerusalem before Nehemiah, but arrived seemingly 2 generations later. The Quran reconciles this in Surah 2:259. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على أروشها قال أنى يحيي هذه الله بعد موتها فأماته الله 100 عام ثم بعثه قال كم لبثت قال لبثت يوما أو بعد يوم قال بل لبثت 100 عام فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنه وانظر إلى حمارك ولنجعلك آية للناس وانظر إلى الإزام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسها لحما فلما تبين له قال أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. Or are you not aware of the one who passed by a city who was in ruins? And remember, they were talking about how Jerusalem was in ruins. If I can find that here, Jerusalem was in ruins at the time of Nehemiah. Uh, okay. You see, the trouble we are in, Jerusalem lies in ruins. Or are you not aware of the one who passed by a city which was in ruins? He wondered, how could Allah bring this back to life after its destruction? So Allah caused him to die for 100 years, then brought him back to life. Allah asked, how long have you remained in this state? He replied, perhaps a day or part of a day. Allah said, no, you have remained here for 100 years. Just look at your food and drink. They have not spoiled. But now look at the remains of your donkey. And so we have made you into a sign for humanity. And look at the bones of the donkey, how we bring them together, then clothe them with flesh. When this was made clear to him, he declared, now I know that Allah is most capable over everything. Who is the man in this verse? It's Ezra. And the commentators explain this. Basically, here you see As-Sa'di's comments on this. That is, or have you seen the one who passed by a town that lay in ruins? That is, its people had vanished, its inhabitants had died out, the walls and ceilings of its building had collapsed. Right, just like the walls and everything they were mentioning, they were collapsed. There was no sign of life in it. Blah blah blah. Okay. The verse refers to Ezra and fixes the chronological issues. Ali ibn Talib said 2259 meant Uzair. Ibn Jarir also reported it, and this explanation was also reported by Ibn Jarir and Ibn Abi Hatim from Ibn Abbas, Al-Hasan Qatada as-Su'di, and Sulaiman bin Buraida. So there's so many companions who are saying this that it's obviously from, obviously seems it's from the Prophet ﷺ. The fact that Ibn Abbas and even Ali ibn Talib, Ibn Abi Talib mentioned it. Ali radiallahu anhu is a major companion. Ibn Abbas is a major explainer of the Quran according to the Prophet ﷺ. Mujahid bin Jabr said that the ayah refers to a man from the children of Israel, and the village was Jerusalem after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it and killed its people. Ibn Kasir also explains, Ishaq bin Bishr reported on the authority of Ibn Abbas and others that Ezra was a saint and a wise man, and basically uh, that when he, after this incident, he rushed to the assembly of the Israelites. Ezra's son was 118 years old, and his children's children now were lords of the assembly. Right. So that generations later this happened. Were basically that after Ezra found Jerusalem in ruins, he went to sleep and he was resurrected, or he was, or he went to sleep for 2 generations, right, 100 years, or he was made to die, and then resurrected 100 years later, and that means 2 generations later, as Ibn Kathir confirms, his children's children were now lords of the assembly. Okay. The person referred to in 225 is Ezra. That makes it easy for us to reconcile the differences in Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra leaves 13 years before Nehemiah, but Nehemiah reaches Jerusalem before Ezra and builds the wall. Eliashib was the high priest when Nehemiah built the wall, but Jonathan was the high priest in the time of Ezra. Commentators try to cope and say that Eliashib is still the high priest, or it's a different Jonathan, son of Eliashib, 2 generations after Eliashib. The Quran clearly states that it was in ruins, and Ibn Kathir says that when he was raised, the city was populated. His grandchildren's generation were part of the assembly. This would put Ezra resurrecting around 90 to 100 years after his death. 13 plus 40 plus 40, almost perfectly matching the Quran's account, right? And of course, 100 years seems to be maybe an approximation or exactly however you want to see it, right? Anyway, there's still a massive problem for Christians and Jews who don't know how to reconcile this to this day. So they say scribal errors, figurative wall, etc. Even in Nehemiah, I think it says mentions Ezra as one of the ones who helped rebuild it. So there's confusion there that throughout it seems that Nehemiah and Ezra are not connected. They have no idea of each other. They're not contemporaries, but yet randomly they're contemporaries. So it seems the scribes were tampering, trying to fix what's going on. Right here, they mentioned then Ezra rose up from before the house of God, departed from thence. So, who was the family of high priest? Eliashib was the grandson of Joshua the high priest, and succeeded his father Joachim as such. But though Johanan was never high priest, so they try and cope to make Johanan not a high priest. Even though I showed you that we have a historical record from that time, the earliest Jewish writings we have, they confirm he's a high priest. Here in this one, they mention, but why should Ezra betake himself to the chamber of one who must have been but a mere boy? A certain chamber in the temple's precincts as Johanan's chamber, because it had become associated with the name of Eliashib's grandson during his high priesthood. This appears to be the most probable explanation, that he was actually a high priest. Johanan, son of Eliashib, was of a different family from Johanan, the son of Judea, and grandson of Eliashib. So now they say, oh, it must have been from a different family. Scholars are divided over the chronological sequence of the activities of Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra came to Jerusalem in the 7th year, blah, blah, blah. Most scholars hold that Ezra lived during the rule of Artaxerxes I. Okay, some have difficulty with this assumption. Nehemiah and Ezra seem to have no knowledge of each other. Their missions do not overlap. However, Nehemiah 12, both are leading processions on the wall. What is going on? Neither of them seem to know each other, yet one place randomly mentions that Nehemiah is there, or that Nehemiah randomly mentions Ezra is helping build a wall as part of the list of the people who were rebuilding the wall. That doesn't make any sense. Nehemiah and Ezra seem to have no knowledge of each other. Their missions don't overlap, yet this is happening. The assumption would imply the biblical account is not chronological, basically saying that Ezra arrived in the 7th year of the rule of Artaxerxes II, some 50 years after Nehemiah. So look how they're coping, trying to fix this. The last group of scholars regarded the 7th year as a scribal error and hold that the two men were contemporaries. So look how they're trying to fix. This is what the University of St. Andrews says. Unclear if these were original, the same figure, or not, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The biblical chronologies are unclear, and there's textual confusion regarding where and when Ezra appeared. Here we have a third proposal. Okay, I already explained this to you, how they tried to, quote, cope, right? So anyway, the counter-arguments are laughable, and there are many, many more issues related to these two books, such as authorship, etc., and it genuinely hurts reading through them. Ezra arriving. Here there were the 245 male and female singers, okay? Ezra arrives in Jerusalem 13 years earlier than Nehemiah. When Nehemiah arrives, the city is in ruins and has a small number of people. This is the summary, so pay attention, okay? I'm going to read it again. This is a summary of what's going on. In the Bible, Ezra arrives in Jerusalem 13 years earlier than Nehemiah, okay? But when Nehemiah arrives, the city is in ruins and has a small number of people, and he rebuilds the wall. And remember, first, the city was destroyed by the Babylonians. So then Ezra arrives, and then 13 years later, Nehemiah arrives. When Nehemiah arrives, the city is in ruins and has a small number of people, and so then Nehemiah rebuilds the wall, and Eliashib is the high priest. However, when Ezra arrives, the wall is already built, and there are a large number of believers, and they're already having interfaith marriages. And Johanan, the grandson of Eliashib, is the high priest. So what's going on? The chronology makes no sense. Ezra is supposed to come 13 years earlier, yet obviously he's come generations after. And Nehemiah in the Quran reconciles this with one verse in 2:59, which mentions that actually what happened was when Ezra arrived in Jerusalem and he saw that it was in ruins, he said, how will God bring, basically, this verse. The one who passed by a city which was in ruins, he wondered, how could Allah bring this back to life after its destruction? So Allah caused him to die for 100 years, then brought him back to life. That totally makes sense. That actually Ezra arrived first, then for 100 years he was made to die, then resurrected, and that explains why 2 generations had passed when Ezra came back to being, right? Remember, a generation in the Bible is 40 years, so 40 years plus 40 years, plus the fact that he came 13 years earlier, so that's about 93 years, or you could put, everything is approximate, so around 100 years, 93 years. Maybe he arrived in the beginning of the 3rd generation, which is still would count as 2 generations later, meaning the 2 generations are relevant here because it means that still the grandson would be the high priest, right? It's not like he would be replaced. So the 100 years totally works. Anyway, this was the issue the Quran reconciles, fixes, the Bible here. You can see another cope. They try and say the wall must have been metaphorical. Here, Benson commentary, and to give us a wall, the protection of the kings of Persia, whose edicts were their security against all the enemies, wherewith they were compassed in the gracious providence of the Lord, which had planted them in his own land and watched over them from time to time. So they're trying to say, no, the wall must have been metaphorical. Look at how they are coping. Oh my, oh my. We have more issues with the book. For example, similarly, Ezra and Nehemiah were counted as a single book with the name Ezra in Hebrew Bible before the 15th century. And it was Leopold Zunz in 1832 who argued that the chronicler rather than Ezra composed these works. And that, the fact that they're arguing about authorship makes it seem likely that perhaps scribes were even um, trying to alter and play with the text and trying to cope with the problems that were clearly being mentioned here. So there were one book, and there were obvious issues with chronology, so they were changed to try to make them contemporaries. But even that doesn't work because they clearly have no knowledge of each other, and then there are contradictions when they try and make them contemporaries. For example, having the singers, but making having the same singers, but making a mistake with how many singers there were. Right? If Ezra and Nehemiah was one book, it would make sense to insert things to make it make more sense. Okay. And again, I showed you Ali ibn Talib, Ibn Abu Talib, and Ibn Abbas, and clearly mentioned that this is about Ezra. This verse is about Uzair. So in Islamic tradition, this verse is about Uzair, the verse about the man who was died and resurrected 100 years later. It is about Uzair, as Ali ibn Talib said it means Uzair, and so did Ibn Abbas, Abu Talib, right? Ali bin Abi Talib. You know why Abu Talib so much times? Because of course there's a Abu Talib. So Ali ibn Ali bin Abi Talib said the ayah meant Uzair, and yeah, Ibn Abbas said that too. So it is Uzair. Uzair is Ezra. It's in the Quran. It's Ezra. Uzair, Ezra. Right. That's the Arabic term. Another thing I wanted to show you also is in the Syriac text of 4 Ezra 1448 and the versions that derive from it, there is a brief account of the ascent and apotheosis of Ezra. So Ezra is made in one of these Syriac texts, a text of the 4 Ezra. Ezra is deified. That's what apotheosis means. He's deified. I'll show you what apotheosis means. Ugh, jeez. Elevation to divine status, right? Theos, everyone knows, means God or something in Greek, right? Elevation to divine status. Apotheosis is the glorification of a subject to divine level. So they mentioned that the Syriac text for Ezra, this is according to University of St. Andrews, for Ezra 1448, there's a brief account of the ascent and apotheosis of Ezra. And we know the Jews of Medina used to say that Uzair is the son of Allah. وقالت اليهود أزير ابن الله وقالت النصارى المسيح ابن الله ذلك قولهم بأفواههم. It's in the Quran. يداهئون قول الذين كفروا من قبل قاتلهم الله أن يؤفكون. The Jews say Uzair is the son of Allah. Ezra is the son of Allah. And the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. That is their statement from their mouths. They imitate the saying of those who disbelieved before. May Allah fight them. How are they deluded? So just wanted to show you that even that is mentioned in the Quran, but of course those Medina Jews were making these claims outwardly as well. I just wanted to mention that to show you that is in their text as well, the deification of Ezra. Remember, we found in this series many connections with the Talmud. How much of these stories are even discussed? People don't know about most of the connections that we talk about. There are also unique stories in the Quran, such as the story of Moses and his companion, and in Surah Al-Kahf, that basically they go to a man named Al-Khidr, and they have to be patient as Al-Khidr does some deeds. It looks like he's doing bad deeds, and the story. So there are unique stories in the Quran as well. As we're wrapping up this series, Again, someone would have noticed if he was being taught. Again, the Bible wasn't even translated, let alone the Talmud and many of these Greek Syriac texts and lost texts, and even Egyptian. Remember, we talked about the hieroglyphics a couple times in part 2. Remember, the prophet was sincere, so it doesn't make sense that he'd be copying all this. Even if he could, even if he tried to, he couldn't read or write. And again, he was in Mecca where these stories weren't known, right? And even if he could read or write, he couldn't read or write these other languages. And there were no people around to teach him. Besides, again, he was sincere. So let's wrap it up. I'll do the. Remember, we looked at the Mary being a Levite and connected to and Jesus being connected to David in some way, and then this Ezra one. Just 2 examples. Obviously, it went out to be long because the examples were long. So I'll do the summary and then a reminder that I'll do some summary conclusion videos where I go on the conclusion of where I talk about the conclusions of this intertextuality series and how it proves Islam. But basically, the argument is looking at intertextuality between the Quran and Judeo-Christian traditions, biblical and extra-biblical. How the Quran has intimate knowledge of these Hebrew, Greek, Syriac texts, many of which were untranslated and in different areas. Yet the Quran will reference or respond to them. The author of the Quran clearly knew these texts and languages, yet Muhammad couldn't read or write, nor could the Arabs as a whole. In fact, the Arabs were unfamiliar with even the basic biblical stories. This proves Islam, especially when you put it together with the other things like how Muhammad about the other things we know about Islam in the Quran and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like the fact that the Quran is a literary miracle, the prophecies of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the historical miracles of the Quran, the biblical prophecies of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the message of Islam and it being far superior to every other religion, the miraculous expansion of Islam, etc., etc. Right? Again, just remember the Prophet couldn't read or write. Many of these texts untranslated, lost texts in different areas. He was sincere. He's not mad. He was most of these in Meccan stories revealed in Mecca, where there were no Jews and Christians. None of the Arabs knew these stories. Also, people would have noticed if he was being taught, and everything is a tradition. I summed that up pretty well in this paragraph. So after this, there will be coming just some summary videos because I'll expand on like these points a little bit more again. These points that I talked more in depth in the episode 1. And also I'll read out these quotes, which I read out, I think, in episode 7. These ones right here. And I'll talk a bit about how this proves Islam and this and that. Then I'll repost another guy's video. With that, I'll say bye-bye. 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 I'm so relieved we're done with the series. So, yeah. Before the video begins, I just want to clarify. In the video, I say this is the final part. This is part 10 and the final part. But actually, I have another part I'm preparing as well, so there is going to be a part 11 at some point, inshallah. And then if I find more stuff, I'll probably do more parts after that as well. But for now, I just wanted to clarify that even though in the video I say this is the final part, actually there is going to be at least one more part that's going to come out at some point. So there is going to be a part 11, despite what I say in the video.